a few of you out there, and so glad you guys could make it for our final in this masterclass. Been looking forward to this one. It's one of my favorite people in the world, and she's good enough to go by one name in her solo artist career, Charmaine. So she's kind of like Cher or Sting or something like that. She's that level artist. So.
No.
Anyway, let me give you just 30 seconds on Charmaine's background, and then we'll turn it right over to her because I know you're just eager to hear from her. Charmaine is of Chilean descent from her mom and dad, and she was born in the United States, so she has dual citizenship in the U.S. and Australia, and she got her early start with their family ministry, which was a touring worship ministry that went all over the place, singing and getting the gospel out to people through worship. And then she later, I think you were 16 when you joined Rebecca St. James, who at the time was one of the top Christian female artists, and she was a background singer for Rebecca St. James back then. Then I think at that time moved to Nashville and was pursuing a solo career. You can still find her solo work on Spotify, and it's really awesome. It's this really cool conglomerate of lots of different influences. She's currently wife and mom to Cameron and Carter, in that order. And she's one of our primary worship leaders at the Adventure Campus, along with Peter Burton. She's also one of the primary writers with Thrive Worship. And so we have a lot to talk about today with Charmaine. Can you guys all please welcome Charmaine? Hey. Yo.
Thanks, guys.
Hey, Charmaine. How's it going?
Doing great.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. So we've just been talking about with these other worship people that have been on, just their life and how they've used their gifts for God's kingdom, and the whole thing of developing our gifts and talents for God's glory. So maybe you could talk a little bit about just how you got started, your mom and dad's role in getting you into this life of worship.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you very much, guys, for having me. It is awesome. If you don't understand the words that are coming out of my mouth, I am slightly Australian. And so you're just going to have to, you can write it in the chat. You can just be like, I did not understand that word, you Australian. You know what I mean? So don't be afraid. But I am from Sydney, Australia, but I don't look Australian. My parents come from Chile in Central South America. They were very little. Their parents moved to Chile. My grandparents formed the first Hispanic church in New South Wales, and that's how my parents met, through the little small group that started for that. And they started a choir. It was the first Hispanic choir in Australia that toured and sang and all that sort of stuff. But they were so on fire for God that they wanted to continue to spread the good news of Jesus through music. And so they started a full-time ministry out of that choir. And they booked a tour through all of Australia. And when I mean all of Australia, I mean you do a big circle around Australia, and that's what they did. All of New Zealand and America and Central and South America. It was a 10-month tour. And a few months before that tour started, my mum found out she was pregnant with me. So my mum freaked out a little bit. My dad was like, you know what? Nowhere in the Bible does it say go out and preach the gospel to all nations, tongues, except when you're pregnant. So he was like, the Bible says it's fine. Let's go. Which I still think they're a little bit crazy, but they went out and the Lord provided. I ended up being born in West Covina, California on tour. And 5 days after I was born, I was back on tour with my parents. And my family in Australia didn't see me until I was about 5 months old after that tour in Sydney. So that was the start to my life, Brandon. It's not normal. And I was raised on the bus. So I did schoolwork on the bus. I'd be studying about carangos. I've been in America for too long. I was studying about kangaroos, and I'd look out my window on the bus, and I'd see like a whole herd of kangaroos just hopping by. But that was my life. I got to see the world through the window of a bus. Yeah.
You were essentially homeschooled,
I was,
bus
I was
schooled,
homeschooled.
bus
Yes.
schooled.
But because I was always around other adults and I was an only child, I literally thought I was an adult since I was 3 months old. I just thought that's what I was born into. That's what I was. But I definitely wasn't, because I loved to rollerblade, and I was on half pipes rollerblading. I was a tomboy. I know, but that's so nerdy, guys. I wasn't even like cool skateboard, chick. I was the rollerblade chick on a half pipe. Anyway.
Well, what was that like growing up and on tour? Maybe a couple things. What role did your parents have in developing your musicianship? And also maybe some of the artists you looked up. We got a question in the chat here. Some of the artists you looked up to, or just people you looked up to growing up.
So my parents didn't let me listen to any secular music. Everything was always Christian music. But within the Christian music realm, like, it was whatever I wanted. And so there's a few questions in that. My parents were the musical directors. So my dad was the musical director of the group. My mom was the first soprano, but she was more of the road manager as well. So they were a great combination. And they would manage the group, and usually there was about 10 people in the group. Anyway, details you don't need to understand. But they would basically go into any church, any school, any jail. In Australia, they have these pastors' union or something like that, where for a town, all the pastors will get together and put together an event. And usually we're invited to those events. And basically we'd have our original music, some praise and worship, but we would share our testimony. In the middle of that concert, my parents would have me come up since I was about 4 years old and sing one song. But because they knew that I was born into a world that was so saturated with music and ministry and all things that are music and ministry, they were very, very careful to not make me feel like I had to do it. So they were very much, my mum every night for every concert would ask me, she'd be like, do you want to sing tonight? And sometimes I'd be like, no, I'm okay. And she was like, okay, no worries. Like, that's fine. And then sometimes I would put on my pink little dress and I'd be like, yes, I'm going to sing, because I put 2 and 2 together, guys, that if I got up on stage and sang, that the other little kids would recognize that there's a kid that they don't know and that maybe they would want to play with me. So that sounds kind of sad, but I knew if I put on my pink dress and I sang, I would be playing with friends after the concert. So, selfish, ulterior motives, but hey, what do you do when you're 4 or 5?
Just trying to make friends and share the gospel.
Just trying to make friends and share the gospel. Yes. Primarily at that point, make friends. But yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, Brandon, but that was a little bit. What was? So yeah,
so your dad in the musical part of it, was there like how did you learn to sing? Was it just like because you were just saturated with it, or was there actually like your dad going, hey, work on this and this, and what did that look like?
My dad, I was always around the practices, the vocal practices. I think that's why I'm a stickler for pitch and harmony and all that. Nowhere near as much as my dad though, but I was just always around it. But here's the thing, guys, like even if you grow up in a musical family, not everyone's going to be musical. I think it's something that is like literally, we call it a gift, but it's what that person is just naturally inclined to, even since they were a baby. Why do some babies just love to dance, or other ones love to figure stuff out with puzzles? You can just already tell. Or others are just like my little guy will just, and I did this too, but Cameron did this also. He will just stop and listen to music. Like, he is obsessed with the sound of music. Julie Andrews, I think he loves more than he loves his own mother. So I don't know what it is about that lady. She's got some magic with her, but he'll listen to it. and he'll try and mimic it and stuff. But we didn't teach him to do that, you know. So I think I was naturally inclined to just like it, you know. I was, and it was so helpful that I was saturated with it. So my dad didn't really give me any lessons or anything. When I was about 11, I did vocal lessons for about a year. But that's the only professional help that I got. Professional help. I was in and around a group that was constantly being professional in their routines, and to the point that I would sit at the front seat and do my schoolwork. And if anyone during the concert did a wrong note, like I knew everybody's parts. So I would look at them. Apparently that's what I would do. And they hated that because they knew that if I looked at them, it meant that they stuffed up on their parts. Anyway, yeah.
So that leads us to the next part of that question that's in the chat stream here is like, they say, this is from Ella. She said, who did you look up to growing up? And another one is, when you would tour with your parents, did you meet a lot of inspiring people?
Oh, yes. Great question, Ella. Who did I look up to, like musically, or just in general? Probably musically. Is that what you meant?
Like both.
Like both. Okay, great. So, like I said, I listened to music so much, but because my dad was a producer, whenever I had like a CD, when I was really little, I had tapes. I would look at the back and I would read who wrote the songs, who mixed them, and who produced them. I was very much involved with who produced them. So I literally would follow producers, and my first hero was Mark Heimerman. And he did, the first tape that I really owned as my own was called Prism Red, and it was a bunch of like lullabies that they made really hip, right? And eventually he ended up producing a band called DC Talk. And DC Talk, through DC Talk, he did like all the huge Christian bands back in the day. Like, and so I would follow him, and I could recognize his music before I knew it was him that produced it. Mainly because I loved the arrangements. I loved if he was a part of the songwriting process. I could sense it, and I was learning from him. So he was like my inspiration, and years later I got to work with him, and we did an EP that never got released, but it was pretty cool that I got to work with one of my heroes, right? So he was one of my musical heroes, but my real life actual heroes would have been my parents. And I know that's not probably the cool thing to say, and my parents are definitely not the definition of cool, you know, but I met Jesus through my parents. The thing that they were, think about it, they were super young when they started this ministry, right? And they started singing together with their friends when they were your age. Like, think about that. When they were your age, they started singing. So I knew their story, and I knew from your age up until when they started their ministry and they got married and they went on the road, like they did some pretty heroic stuff that was filled with like huge faith, like crazy faith. So, and I was a part of that. Like I was a part of going on the road and the dreams that they had now that they were doing it, and visiting different countries and ministering to people that nobody else could get to minister to. Like they were my heroes. So I don't know if that answers your question. And Brandon, you said something else.
Well, yeah, there is another part to that, but I'm interested in understanding. That's very curious. You were drawn to the credits on the back of the album instead of the artist picture on the front. Like is that your dad's influence? Him being a producer, you gravitated towards the people behind the scenes?
Oh yeah, probably, because I saw my dad administrating everything, like from the recording process to the writing process, everything.
Well, maybe you can explain that for the kids that don't know what a producer does.
Yeah, so producer basically, well, see, now it's a little bit different because now it's more of the artist that kind of drives and produces, but at least it's kind of like a person that sees the vision, right? And holds on to the vision and helps bring the vision to life. So whether that means if the artist comes in and says, hey, I want to feel like there's rainbows just bursting out of the clouds, and and but he's described, because this is what I would do with my producer. I'd be like, this is and it sounds a little bit like this song, but it really is more like that, and it's a combination, and it's this anthem that I'm trying to bring across. Well, my producer would come in and he'd be like, okay, I think this huge string section would just be awesome over this area, and then we bring it down, and we just bring it down to a piano when it comes down to the lyrics of Jesus, take my heart, really intimate. Like, he would bring the vision to life in many various different details. It's hard to get right into the weeds of it without boring everybody.
Sure.
But basically, my dad would be there from the whole process, from the writing process to recording it. And that's back when we didn't have Melodyne. For those of you who don't know what Melodyne is, that's when they fix your vocals so it sounds almost perfect. We didn't have that back in the day. My dad just had his ear, and you better get it right in the recording. So that means you have to record a part over and over and over with the same emotion and everything so you can get it right. And it would come across, lovely. So he would do that, record the parts, all the harmonies, and then he would record the instruments and then add instruments, synthetic ones like strings and all that sort of stuff. And then he would mix it so it all sounded nice, and even, and then master it, which was kind of like putting the polish over it. And then the work is never done, is it, Brandon?
Right.
But that's kind of what he does as a producer. Yeah.
That's great. The other part of that question was, as you were touring with your parents, did you meet any inspiring people? Who are some inspiring people?
Yes. Yes. Let me think. Wait. I got some good ones. I know I do. Oh, one time we went into a little town. This is a fun side note thing. And some nuns brought us in. And when I say little town, it was like a tiny town that the nuns in this little Catholic church was the only church and the only social gathering that they would do for the community was they like potlucks and, fundraisers and for the community. Anyway, they invited us to come in to do like an open concert outdoors, all that sort of thing. This was a tiny, tiny town. When we arrived, there was barely anyone there, but I saw this tiny little herd of children that literally looked like Peter Pan and the Lost Boys and Girls. And they had horses that didn't have saddles. There was ponies. There was a big giant horse. There was like chubby fat ones and skinny ones, all sorts of different horses. That these kids, let me tell you, one of the youngest was like 5 and he was riding the pony. Like, it was incredible. And I was like, these are my people. Oh my gosh, where have I been? Where have they been all my life? I made friends in an instant, and I went horse riding with them throughout the town. Come to find, these kids were orphans, and the nuns got them jobs through the farmers to run and exercise their horses.
Wow.
And they would, the nuns would give them food. The farmers would pay them to do that. Obviously something very small, but that was their job throughout the day, to exercise and take care of the horses. So we went at it. They taught me how to canter. They taught me how to gallop. I fell off like 3 times. It was glorious. Yeah. So those kids were my heroes. But who else did I meet? Man, I got to meet Darlene Check. She's one of my favorites back in the day in Australia. She's a worship leader. Interesting story, I got to meet DC Talk, which, like, who are your favorite Christian bands right now? Like, who's like, you would just die if you met them? You can write it in the chat real quick. Well, basically, we went to a music festival in like our version of your Disneyland, and Lauren Daigle, nice. Wow, we got some classy. Thrive Worship, Matthew. That was very cheeky and 2 stars for you. Yeah, basically DC Talk was that for me. Like DC Talk, Toby Mac was amazing. And I loved Toby Mac the most because I knew that he wrote most of the songs. So I was like mad respect for him. I loved him, but I also loved, was it Kevin Max? Because I thought his vocal was incredible. Anyway, Loved them all. Oh, Stephen Curtis Chapman. Who said that? Oh, nice. Toby Mac, yeah. Yes, good. All these are amazing. So we're at a festival in Australia, and because we were a part of the festival, we had backstage passes. This is the first time I've ever been at a festival, and it was DC Talk. They did their show. It was the biggest one. It was packed. People were going crazy. Their background singers was an old school group called Out of Eden, which was awesome, and it was just amazing. And then we went backstage, and we knew where their camper was, so we just kind of hung around the camper. And Michael Tate and Toby Mac and Kevin were walking back from the stage back to their camper, and they were like, "Oh, look at these cute little girls." They thought we were cute because we were like tiny. We were like 10 and like 7 and like 8. And, like 2 of my cousins, the ones that when I had my son, they actually came from Australia. So it was those 2 that I was with. And they were like, "Hey, come say hi," which, you know, you never approach a camper ever with adults if they're inviting you. But we knew it was safe because we were with adults and it was DC Talk. We came over to the door of the camper and they went in and sat down and they were like, "Hey, where are you Australian girls from?" And we just had a chat with them, and inside we were dying. And that was my claim to fame. I got to meet some of my heroes, which is pretty cool.
That's great. Well, that'll lead us into the next section I want to talk about. And some of these questions, Phoenix and Matthew, we're going to get to those because those are part of the whole story. So just be patient for one moment. Maybe let's talk about the next step in your career when you moved on with Rebecca St. James. For those of you who don't know, she's basically the equivalent of that time, Lauren Daigle of that time. She was like the most popular female Christian artist of that time. And Charmaine, again, was one of her singers, background singers. And maybe you can just talk about that, what that was like. Did you feel like you were well prepared from your previous ministry? What did you learn in that whole process?
So I got signed to Rebecca St. James's father's label. So her father, who managed her, became my manager. And that's how I came from, when I was 16, from Sydney to Nashville, Tennessee. And that was a huge culture shock. And even with all my years of touring and singing with my parents' ministry, I think that was good preparation, but obviously not enough to really prepare me for what I was about to start doing. So I would open for Rebecca and do like 2 to 3 songs before her concert, and then I would go and BGV for her when her concert started. That in itself was like training for me. Even being a BGV and watching her consistently was like, just mass. That was like going to university for me. Like I didn't get to go to university. I had already jumped into what I was, called or what I wanted to do. But man, was that like training, because it wasn't just a couple of 100 people or even 50 people or 20 people at a church, depending on what church we were going to in Australia. This was like a couple of thousand minimum, up to 5, up to 10,000, especially when we were doing festivals in Europe and traveling to all sorts of awesome places. It would change. So, and it was different to learn how to speak to that crowd, to learn how to move in front of that crowd, to get them to move. It was just a different way of doing things. But that was my training with her. I eventually did more albums. Her brothers that later became For King and Country, Luke would run the spotlight and Joel was the other backup singer. So really we were all in training. We were all learning how to do this thing on the road. Like that was them doing the grind, and Joel would load in every day, and every stage was different. So he was the production manager. He had to make sure that our equipment fit the stage, and he was 16 years old. And a lot of times the the crew would get a little bit like, who is this kid telling us what to do? But let me tell you, if you know what you're doing, you know what I mean? It doesn't matter what age you are, you can do it, you know? And I think it was so cool to see them all working at such a young age for such a big production. Their youngest brother, Josh, was in charge of all merchandise. And that means ordering stuff in, making sure the money at the end of the day makes sense. And to this day, I think he makes more money than all of them because
Wow.
of the business that he's built.
Wow.
Yes. And he's 8 years younger than me.
Can you talk a little bit about with Rebecca and the people surrounding you, the other singers and stuff? What was it like to develop your craft specifically, like taking care of your instrument, developing your instrument, you know, utilizing it to that high of a level? What did you learn in that season?
I learned that repetition is key. Practice is key. I learned that doing it, even though it doesn't, even though you might be afraid, and I was very afraid and very nervous all the time, because I was dealing with people that were pros. I mean, the musicians that she would have, you know, the schedule that she was on, I was dealing with like high level people. So I realized that even as young as I was, whatever opportunity opened up, if they told me, hey, we're going to do this, or we're going to do a dance move, and they literally brought a choreographed person that worked with NSYNC to choreograph us. Guys, I cannot dance to save my life. But there was the choreograph person from NSYNC that was teaching us dance moves, and legit, we looked like NSYNC by the end of it. Like we were pros. But they were teaching us like how to move and do stuff like that back in the day. You know, whatever opportunity opens up, long story short, just take it and do it over and do it over until you become till you do it perfectly, and then find something else that challenges you and keep doing that over and over and over. And by the end of it, you'll realize that you were 10 times better in your craft than you were before. And it's just kind of those little things that you just kind of got to do over and over and over again. As simple as doing a scale, you know, and practicing, mastering that scale until it is just second nature, you know, and then that is kind of what makes you better at the end of the day. It's kind of the mundane, kind of the boring, kind of the repetitious, but man, if you do it over and over, it changes your life.
Well, now you know you're not going to be let off the hook till we see those NSYNC dance moves.
Well, that's not going to happen, guys. There was one, and not even kidding, it's so bad. It was like this, and we had to put the thumb out. I was like, can I just not do just one finger? She was like, no, it's got to be like this all the way down. It was embarrassing. But
All right.
We were really cool back then. So,
So funny. Okay, so fast forward. I think this is it's been maybe 6 or 7 years now, I think. And I got I had a conversation with Allison's husband, Aaron, about this female Christian artist out of Nashville that we should have her out to Bayside and just try her out and see what happens. So out of the blue, we bring you in and have you come and lead worship. And it was amazing. And soon after that, you were brought on staff. And maybe talk about that a little bit, like your transition to Bayside, your current role at Adventure, and what that's looked like for you.
Yeah. Wow. That was, it's crazy. Aaron was trying to get me for years. I've known Aaron. He came through Rebecca, Ralph, one of the sound men. Anyway, he came through Rebecca. That's how he got his start. And then he took off and, you know, became awesome with other Christian artists and stuff. So, but from about 10 years, I've known him more now. But he would come to our house and have dinner whenever he was in town off tour, that sort of stuff. He just felt like road tour family. And so he texted me and he was like, hey, you should come visit. And I was like, why do you want me to do a concert? He was so vague about it. And And he was like, no, just come and hang out with the church. And I was like, nobody's ever asked me to hang out with the church. I don't think he wanted to tell me that they were looking for a worship artist, because at that point I was in the middle of making another album. So when it finally worked out for me to come, I loved it. And they seemed to like me, or they liked the Australian accent. I think that's what it was. And then and they kept asking me to come back. So it took me a year to kind of come over. But when I finally did, we just knew that that's where God wanted us to be. And interestingly enough, even when I first came to America when I was 16, well, I was really 15 when I found out. It took a year before I actually came over. And I think the Lord was very gracious in that, because it gave us time to process and to settle with the fact that a huge life change is coming ahead, you know, and emotionally, physically, mentally, everything. I think we were ready and prepared for it. So, but here's the funny thing. All my years in Nashville and touring with Rebecca and for King and Country back in the day, and, you know, Newsboys and whoever else we toured with, all of that was preparation. There is no way that I would have gotten a job, you know, offered a job the first few weeks that I was here. There's no way I would have gotten that job offer if I didn't have all the years of preparation from touring with Rebecca and doing that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And there's no way that I even would have been prepared for that if I didn't have all those years of preparation with my parents' ministry in Australia. So everything has prepared me for the next stage, for the next stage, for the next stage. The Lord has utilized every aspect of my training that I had, and he hasn't wasted any of it. So all I'm saying, wherever you're at, and remember, for me, this started as a professional singer on the road touring. When I first joined my parents' ministry, I was 11 years old. This started when I was 11. Like, legit, that's the moment the door opened. That's the moment that things started to change in my life, and every door has led to where I am right now. And being a part of a worship team that's a part of a church that's doing incredible things, that's a part of a church that's probably one of the biggest right now in California. So that means the reach, that means the influence is huge, and I get to be a part of that. The Lord's been preparing me since I was 11.
Yeah. Here's the thing too, which is so remarkable. Kids, listen up to this. This one's really important. When Charmaine came to sing with us for the first time, obviously she was amazing musically and vocally. It was just stellar. One of the big reasons Aaron asked her to come and just hang out is we wanted to see what kind of person she was. She literally is just one of the best people you could hope to know. Just character-wise, heart-wise, her devotion to God's calling on her life is really the thing above anything else that got her the position for where she is now at Bayside. And I would probably, I could probably assume this, I would attest that to your mom and dad's influence in your life, and just from the very beginning, having God's hand over your life and your ministry. Would that be true?
Oh, yeah, they're still better people than I think I'll ever be. Yeah, they're still my heroes.
Can you talk about that a little bit, Charmaine? We had a conversation recently about one of your trips to Nashville and meeting one of your heroes, Darlene Check, who she founded Hillsong Worship, if you guys aren't familiar with that name. And the conversation she had with you, and the thing that was just like an epiphany for you about worship and the life of worship. Do you remember the comment you made to me about that?
Yeah. So Thrive Worship got invited to a songwriting retreat, and Darlene was there, and Matt Redman, all these big worship people were there. So we felt like we were the rookies, and it was a lot of fun to be a part of that. But Darlene would do she did our devotions for two of those mornings, and literally, guys, everyone sees Darlene, every worship leader sees Darlene as the mother of praise and worship. Like, she is what started almost this new movement of praise and worship. Like, the sort of praise and worship that you guys sing today is because of the new styles and ideas that she introduced with her team. And so, like, every worship leader has massive respect for her. So she said during her, she has something really simple. During her worship time, she goes, every praise and worship leader asks me, what is worship to you, or what style of worship? What does worship mean to you? There was a specific question I'm forgetting right now. Like, what style of worship do you like? How do you do worship? Any questions about worship, they just ask her. And she said she started to get a little bit tired of that, because it started to feel like worship was something that you just kind of do at church. It's a style, it's a season, or it's a day. She goes, I was in a conversation and I just had to stop it. And she was talking to a praise and worship. She goes, worship is my life. It's not a lifestyle, because the lifestyle implies that the style could change, whereas worship is life, period. And meaning that you're not constantly singing, you're not constantly physically lifting your hands. It means that your life is like Romans 12. It's on the altar to Jesus. In other words, you're constantly surrendering your life to him so that you can die to self and be alive in Jesus. And being in Jesus means that you love like him, that you take care of other people like him, that you feed people when they're hungry, that you give grace, that you give the clothes off your back, because these are all the things that Jesus does, right? So to be in him means to live a life of worship, not just songs. It cannot be a lifestyle, because styles go out of fashion.
That's so good. Not just a lifestyle, but it is life, actually.
Life, period. Yeah.
That'll kind of lead us to, I think, another question here from Ed. He's saying, when you're leading worship, how do you keep focused on the worship experience versus getting caught up in the technical side of performing and being on stage?
Oh, very good. Can you say that again?
Well, how do you stay focused on worship versus everything it takes to execute it, to performance versus worship, basically?
Yeah. The best thing you can do with that is going to be simple. Make sure you spend as much time practicing as possible, so that you know the song, so that your band is comfortable. And this is the one for me, so that I know the lyrics enough that I'm not going to be worried about not knowing the lyrics. That's always my struggle. So that when you're in the moment, you can be in the moment, and you let the chips fall where they may. So you do as many reps as you possibly can before the worship time, so that you can be present and you're not worried about the technical side of things. And that's for everything. That's for production, that's for sound, that's for the whole team that's surrounding the worship team and the worship team itself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great. Can you give us maybe a little more of a snapshot into what your preparation looks like for weekend services? You mentioned lyrics. What else kind of goes into your getting ready for a weekend?
For me, I mean, I'm not a musician, so I have a little less. Well, I don't know if less is the right word. It's maybe not as my main honestly is making sure that I know the songs. For me personally, if I'm just taking care of myself. When I'm taking care of my team, it is making sure that they have enough time, that we have enough time to run the songs, that we get the transitions right. Because I think the most important thing is to understand that it's not, just for us. All of this is so that people don't get distracted by our shortcomings. So we're making sure that everything is as smooth as possible, so that they're not distracted, even by us, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's going in, it's doing our devos, it is rehearsing, and especially staying on the parts that are a little more difficult, and then obviously doing worship. Now for Peter, for instance, because he's also a musician, he gets there a little bit earlier so that his setup time doesn't take away from practice time with the rest of the band. And he always encourages anybody else who needs to set up to arrive there a little bit early. So make sure your rig, make sure all of that is dialed, as Brandon Neal likes to say. Yeah, just making sure all of that it's just kind of tedious stuff, but I think just important to make the whole situation go smoothly. So.
You mentioned taking care of your team, Charmaine. Can you talk a little bit about what it's like to be a part of this, a Bayside team, what it's like to have this level of people around you and that type of thing?
Yeah, I mean, all our volunteers, I feel like, are just top-notch people. We have one of our volunteers here, Christina. Just wave, Christina. You see her? She legit looks like Pocahontas. I'm like the wannabe, but she's like the real one. And she has 3 beautiful boys, and her husband, Gabriel, is a part of production, but he also joins us for BGVs, and he has a wonderful voice too. I feel okay, in a nutshell, Pete and I have just wanted to make Adventure feel like family. We've wanted everyone to feel at home and welcome and known. And so we've pushed hard for, hey, it is super important that we go hang out at the cafe together pre-COVID. And even post-COVID, is that right? We've maintained a certain amount of like hanging out with social distancing. I think that's a game changer in just making everyone feel like, hey, even if I make a mistake, even if I'm, don't feel like I'm as good as everybody else, you don't really linger on those thoughts, because hopefully you just feel loved and accepted and supported by everyone. So if there's stuff that you need to work on, hey, we're in this. We're all working on stuff together, and you will get better in time. Like, we're all in this together is kind of the anthem of Adventure. And so I think that changes the tone of how we go about things, and we can keep a high level of, professionalism, I feel like, in a very positive manner, yeah, I don't know if that's making sense, but
no, that's great. That's great. So let's talk about another team that you're involved with, Thrive Worship. And Matthew had a question here about what's it like to produce, write, and create music with that team, with Corbin, Peter, and Melinda.
Yeah, a lot of fun and crazy. Melinda is very loud when she gets excited, and so is Corbin. No, so is Peter. They're all really loud. They flail their arms about. Christina would know this. She's seen Peter do it so many times, and Allison. When he's excited, everyone knows. No, they're just good people. And what I love about our team, Thrive Worship, is that they are genuine in their walk with Jesus. And they're really genuinely trying to write songs that each individual campus is going through. So we've done that many times. We've helped each other write songs. We've written songs with people from Nashville. But a lot of that album was written by our team, and so when you're singing them, just know that those are literally our songs. In other words, our experiences, not just us, but you too. And hopefully that brings a sense of encouragement. That's what we dream. That's what we want. And that's the hope for when we write songs. On the technical side of things, do you want me to get on the technical side of things?
Maybe one thing to address, because I would imagine we have some young budding songwriters here. What would be maybe the 30-second advice you could give to getting started with that, to cultivating that skill set?
Raise of hand, who likes to write songs? Oh, nice. Awesome. So with writing, it's there's no there's no rhyme or reason. Like a lot of people think, do I have to have a melody first? Do I have to have a lyrical idea first? Inspires you first, and then you go with that. If it's a lyrical idea, then you add a melody to it. If it's a melody idea, then you find, you know, lyrics to kind of fit that. It's whatever inspires you first. However inspiration hits you, run with it and put it down immediately. Usually if you wait on it, it kind of dies away. I would do it right away. And so a lot of my songs have been written on napkins from a restaurant. You know, my phone has been great for that, but I like to write. So, you know, whatever I can find. I've written on receipts from my wallet. Just, you know, whatever's on hand to kind of put down that idea. Voice memos and all that sort of stuff. But and in songwriting, if you have a tag, yes, that is awesome. Make sure you have a tag. Make sure you have a hook.
Felix has a tag-on question to this. He asked, how do you find inspiration and what do you do when you get blocked? How do you stay inspired?
Oh, staying inspired. Inspiration is very interesting because it can come from really good times and it can come from really hard times, right? So during this COVID season has been kind of heavy for everyone. We've written so many songs during this season because sometimes when you find yourself in a rock and a hard place, like a really difficult season, that's the time that all these emotions and these feelings and these doubts and these hopes, whatever it is, like they come to surface a lot more when you're under pressure, if that makes sense. So take it and run with it. If you're in a happy season, that means all those feelings are just constantly being released all the time. So grab one of them and put them on a piece of paper. Like, I think staying inspired is really looking at your experience. What are you going through right now that's speaking to you? And let me tell you, every season is going to have something, you know, every age that you're at is going to have a new and fresh perspective that nobody else has. And here's another thing. Even if you write something, you know, a theme of say everyone's writing songs like God is love, right? But nobody really is you. In other words, nobody's going to have your perspective on your take on God's love. So if you write a song on his love, it's going to be so unique because it's coming from your perspective. The only time that it starts sounding like somebody else, if it's not from your perspective and you're just taking something because it sounds nice, you know, in other words, you're taking from somebody else's perspective. So just be encouraged when you do write, even if you're super young or if you're super old, like my age, that nobody's going to see the Lord exactly the way you do. So you have something to say. You have something unique to say. Take it and run with it.
That's great. Maybe one more question here, and then we'll open it up to the students to ask questions personally to you. So Charmaine, you've been responsible for mentoring a lot of our young and upcoming worship leaders and musicians through the school and through just ministry in general. How important is that, speaking to these students here, to encourage them that they understand the mission and the calling of worship and utilizing their gifts and what their role in that in the future of worship?
So can you say the question one more time?
Just how important is for them to take the path that God's got them on seriously and develop these gifts and use them for God's kingdom.
Yes. So how old is everybody for the most part? What age range are we looking at here? I know, Christina, you don't have to say.
9 to adult.
I look your age.
8 to adult.
Relax. From, are we like
11,
school, high school?
11. Looks like junior high through and up. 9.
So real quick, I gave my life to Jesus when I was 11 years old. And when I got baptized, I think it was that very week, I went and I called a meeting with my dad, like a professional meeting. And I was like, I sat down in his studio with him and I said, I want to join your ministry. And he goes, that's great. You want to be one of the singers and all that? And I was like, yes. And he goes, but I'm going to treat you like you're one of the singers. I'm going to expect you to be even more than what they are because you're my daughter, so that nobody can say you have leniency, because you're my daughter. And I was like, done. I'm in. I'm going to be the most professional, and I'm going to be there for every rehearsal, for every wake up call, like everything, like on tour. I am there. I want to do it. And then he said, why? And I was like, I see that what you're doing through music is spreading the hope of Jesus to people that need hope. I was like, I want to be a part of that. It actually had less to do with singing. I loved singing. I loved writing music, but those things were just so common to me that it wasn't something that was like the highest passion. The highest passion for me was that I wanted to spread hope. I wanted to spread the hope of Jesus through my music. And that's why I joined. And when I gave my life to Jesus, I said, this is all I have to serve you. This is what I have. I have my voice, and I have the fact that I can sometimes write songs, and sometimes they're okay, but what I have, I'm going to use for you forever. Like, I was determined. And guys, let me tell you that I think Jesus heard that prayer. I really believe it. I was 11, think about it, 11 years old, and Jesus was honoring the prayer of an 11-year-old. And 4 years after that, I got the call to go to America. At 16, my life changed, and I was touring and singing on the highest level that I could be singing, and touring and all that. And then eventually, came to Bayside. But it all started when I was 11. That's what's crazy to me. To this day, he is still honoring that 11-year-old little girl. So all I'm saying is that I think you have to understand that if you want to serve God, if that is the highest thing for you, and if you say to him, I would love to use what I have for you, number one, he's listening. Number two, he's going to use it. There is no question about it. No question whatsoever. And then through that, I just walked through every door that he opened up. And when I say he, I didn't go through the door thinking, oh, Jesus is opening this door. I would just walk through the door. If it was to write a song, if it was to, eventually I made my own album when I was about 14 years old. I wrote 10 songs myself, and I did that in Australia. I didn't want to do it, but my parents convinced me that it was a great ministry tool to use, and that's how they got me. So I was like, great. We wrote the songs and we did it, and I was 14 years old. And then that was the thing that opened up the door to come to America, and then my life changed through that. So any little door that opens up, you just take it and you run with it. If you talk to Jesus, he's listening, and he takes what you take super seriously. I think people stop on the Bible verse really quick. Brandon, sorry, before you finish the question, because I probably took the question and went in another direction. But my favorite Bible verse was Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, plans not to harm you, but to give you a hope and a future, right? That used to be my favorite Bible verse for the longest time, and there is much truth to that, right? That is very, very true. But now, the older that I've gotten, the more I realize Jesus was pumped for the fact that there was an 11-year-old little girl that was pumped about working with him, and he was excited for that. I wasn't waiting for Jesus to to give me the plans of his life. You know what I mean? I was saying to God, this is what I have and this is what I'm using, and I'm going to use it right now for you. And he was like, yes, finally, let's get to work. And he started with me at 11, which I think is crazy. Because soon after that, I started writing for the album that got me the deal in America, the thing that I toured on for years and years and years and years. And then I came here, and there is no way none of that would have happened if I was just gung-ho and saying, this is what I have and this is what I'm using. And you know who else was like that? Jesus. Jesus was 12, 11, and he took off to the synagogue, and he left his parents, don't do this, left his parents for like 3 days, and they were scared out of their mind. When his mom finally found him, she said, where were you? We've been worried. He said, I have been about my Father's business. Like, he was already on it before his plan ever started. Before Jesus's plan ever started, it started in his 30s, and he was already about his Father's business at 12. I say yes. Now is the time. Like, you now, your age, what you have to offer, when you talk to God, he is listening, and when you are about his business, he is about yours. So man, just be encouraged. Like, what you have going on right now, take every opportunity, because he will waste nothing. Take it from my life. All I have is singing. I still don't know how to play piano. There are many musicians and singers better than me, but yet God has placed me in the place that I am with my one tiny little talent. Brandon, I can't hear you.
There you go. I'm muted. Thank you so much for that. That kind of brings it full circle to, you mentioned Romans 12 about offering yourself as a living sacrifice, and Darlene's thing about it's a life of worship, not just lifestyle. Thank you for that. Let's open it up to the students. We have maybe 1 or 2 minutes. And Ryan, I want to start with you because you've been patiently waiting to ask this question, and I know everyone wants to hear the answer to this. So fire away, Ryan. Can we unmute him? Are you unmuted?
Well, how did you and Cameron get married? Because I heard his perspective, but I'm wondering what yours is.
Well, his perspective is questionable. No, what exactly do you want to know? How we got married, like how we came together, where the ceremony was at, like what are you interested in knowing?
Just kind of like the up to when you got married, like kind of like how it all started and how it got to there.
So you want to hear the gossip about our dating life, right? Cam and I, he was working before he was your middle school pastor. He was actually the young adults pastor at Granite Bay, and he was a co-pastor. He wasn't the main guy. He was a part of a team, and they wanted one of the worship people to come and do like what is worship at one of the young adults meetings, right? And at that time, I was new, and I was the only one on the worship team with an accent. So they were like, let's ask her. And instead of Dina, because Dina was the one who was meant to interview me, I don't know if any of you know Dina Davidson, they were like, how about we get a guy to interview a girl? Like, that'll just be more fun. So they got Cameron to interview. So he actually got in touch with me, emailed me. We sorted out all the questions, and that I met him on stage that night. And apparently tons of people took a lot of photos because we had good chemistry on stage, and everyone was sending photos to Cameron saying, that's your future wife. Apparently he hugged me 2 times that night. I don't know why. It's never necessary to hug a girl 2 times unless she's going to be your wife. So like, that's how it started. I met him on stage at Granite Bay. And then from then on out, we didn't chat for another 2 months or so. And then we chatted one night after the same thing for like 45 minutes straight, and it felt like 10 minutes. That's kind of the first sign that you might like somebody. And then he asked me out for coffee, which for me it's like Jamba Juice. We went to Jamba Juice, and then we spoke for 4 hours. And then I think pretty much that's when he realized he loved me and I was the best woman in his life. And that he was the best guy in my life too. No, we just realized we had chemistry and we're like, this could possibly be awesome. We didn't date for ages. We walked and talked. Literally, he would come to my house, he would have dinner at my parents' house, my parents would chat, and we wouldn't hold hands, we didn't kiss, we didn't even start dating. We just walked and talked so we could get to know each other. And we did that for 3 months straight. I think he hugged me for the first time on my birthday. And I was like, when he hugged me, because he's such a big guy, I was like, it feels like I'm getting hugged by a bear. Because there's like biceps and they're just like, it was awesome. He's still a bear. And now I gave like birth to a bear cub who literally climbs all over me and tries to attack me. Anyway, so through that, we dated. He told me he loved me first. I told him like 2 weeks later. That's terrible. Now you're really hearing the gossip. He knew he wanted to marry me before I was like willing to, go there in my head. I'm a lot slower. He's a lot faster than me. I'm always slow, and we kind of balance each other out in that way. I like to take my sweet time, and he's already thinking of what he's going to do in the next 5 years. So, yeah. And so then we got married in Australia, and we had a reception in America. We had about 30 people from America come to Australia, which is huge. We were like, guys, we're doing an American reception. Like, you don't have to spend that money. But it was awesome to have like all the people really close that love him and all the people that love me. It was cool. He got to see kangaroos. I mean, come on. He got to hold a koala. Like, come on. Like, next to my son, they're the cutest things to hold. Like, and Brielle, I got you. Anyways, does that satisfy your wanting to know?
That was great. Maybe one more. Do we have another question from anybody?
It can be as silly or as I don't know,
totally.
Informative, whatever you want. Yeah. And that marriage.
Matthew looks like he has one.
I got to tell my side of the story. Yes. What is it?
No, you got to unmute, Matthew. You're muted. Still muted. Can we unmute Matthew?
There we go. Audio settings were.
There you go.
Correct.
Okay.
Awesome. I would have a serious question, and I couldn't think of one. So I'll just go with this. What's your favorite food? Oh,
pasta. Can never go wrong with pasta. And I love fruit. My nickname was Fruit Little because all I wanted was fruit. And I still do, but I really want pasta at the same time. So.
Pasta's the best.
But I love food, guys. That's the problem and the blessing at the same time.
Very cool. We're running a little bit over, so I want to honor everybody's time. But Charmaine, just to say thank you, and we're so thankful for what you do in worship, and more than that, just the example you are to the church and these kids, especially here, just in terms of what we were talking about, life of worship kind of stuff,
right.
and just having a heart for worship. Would you do us the honor and just close us in prayer and just kind of bless the whole Arts Academy program?
Yes. Jesus, thank you so much, because even now, as we gather and we're chatting with each other and you are listening, I just ask that whatever age we're at, whatever stage, whatever we bring to you, Father, that you will take it, you will bless it, and you will spread it to the masses. We love you, Jesus, and just help us to know you more. Help us to see you. Help us to trust you. So that we can truly be about our Father's business too. We love you, and what we have, we give to you, and we give it wholeheartedly. And we are excited, Jesus, I am excited to see what you do in every person's life that's here right now. We love you. In your name, amen.
Amen. Thanks, Charmaine.